Hello, everybody. Take two. Just doing an off the cuff episode. Just spat for about 10 minutes and didn't record it. It happens, that's a good warm up. So, I wanted to talk about history. And I wanted to start off talking about the Indo European cultures and culture cluster group that stretched all the way from Ireland to Korea, essentially. There's a lot of theories about it. And the old theory is that it came from around the Caucasus, North or South Caucasus, around Georgia slash Russia. But there was a more recent theory that pointed to the Yamnaya culture that stretched all the way from West Uzbekistan to Bosnia. That could have been the ancestor culture for the Indo-Europeans. I think that a more recent conceptualization of it is more accurate, that there was a large population coming from the Indus Valley 15 or so thousand years ago, 20 to 15,000 years ago. And they combined with the Yamnaya culture. And from about 9,000 BC to 5,000 BC, they moved from Yamnaya steppe over to Eastern Europe and all the way through modern Germany, France, England, and Ireland. Back when Doggerland still connected France and England, and likely England and Ireland. This is before the great floods, after the ice wall melted and released massive amounts of water. As I've described before in similar podcasts, the Vikings did not fly into a rage and start abusing their neighbors for no reason. They had their land thawed and flooded and turned into a marshy swamp, when before it had been viable fields. And as Scandinavia thawed, hardier people moved in north, and the more aggressive and high fidelity members of their society broke down their homes and built ships to travel to far and distant lands to set up shop and live there. Not to colonize, if you will, but to live there. And it's very strange to see modern Viking revivals that don't tap into this reality at all, but instead do align the Vikings with bloodthirsty warriors slaking their blades on the flesh of the innocent. So, neo-Wotanist, neo-Viking, neo-heathen, I don't get along well with those philosophies. But I venerate very strongly the Celtic culture. I trace a lot of my roots from it, from being both Irish, Welsh, English, French, as well as Austrian and German. I even have a little Finnish in me. But I consider myself mostly a Celt. I like to hold myself like a Celt. I like to venerate my Celtic ancestors. And one of the proudest things I have for my Celtic ancestors is the fact that hardly any of them did not convert to Christianity peacefully. It's proven that the Druids consigned their power to St. Patrick. It's true that there were no martyrdoms in England and Ireland, Scotland and Wales. Before the Vikings, there were no martyrdoms. And this is a group of people that recorded their census and history very firmly, very resolutely, very absolutely. So, the Mongol Empire, to get back on topic, extended its borders, historically, to Poland, around the Danube, Wallachia, and Bulgaria, a country that I actually really appreciate. I played Bulgaria in Europa Universalis 4 after breaking out of the Ottoman Empire, and I had a very good time. It's very interesting how a lot of the flavor in that country is a reality that I studied afterwards, that there was agreements between the Byzantines and the Bulgarians, and the Byzantines lied, and the Byzantines, unfortunately, betrayed their oath to the Bulgarians because they were Yamnaya instead of Phoenicia, and quite frankly, it doesn't matter. We're all human, and your man is only as good as his word. And so there's legitimate Byzantium claim in Bulgaria. I find that very fascinating, and you can look more into that. You'll find a lot of interesting mountain pass battles and decent amount of history aligning that. Another suggestion, if you're into that sort of thing, is learning about the Reconquista in Spain. It's fascinating learning about Leon, Castile, Aragon, and Galicia. Then later, Catalonia, Valencia. Apparently, there's some crazy stuff over in Toledo that dates way back to the Celtiberians, who aligned with Carthage during the Second Punic War. Those were the men who created the gladius that was taken in by Rome. Rome, kind of a unoriginal culture, frankly. And it's very interesting to think that they are actually Trojans and not Illyrians, if you will. The combination of Etruscan and classic Greek, that combination in the Balkans known as Illyria, which is what the Croatians to this day trace their lineage to, even though that's a complicated thing. I think a lot of what Croatia's borders more resemble is an area of Bogolomilist suppression. Bogolomilists, talking about Bulgaria, were like the Cathars in the Languedoc in southern France. They were an early Christian heresy, but the Bogolomists, they simply did not believe in building churches. That's it. They weren't worshippers of Yaldabaoth like the Gnostics that ended up with such a horrific interpretation of the divinity of the cosmos that they literally worshipped an archdemon. I'm sorry, I take no pity on the Gnostics when it's very easy to tell that what they're doing is consigning the beauty of the universe to a blind idiot god howling at the wind. I don't respect the Germans that do that, and I don't respect anybody else that does that for that matter. But the Bogolomilists were probably better Christians than the early Roman Christians. And they were persecuted very severely, and one of the areas that they were persecuted the most severely was the modern borders of Croatia. North of Croatia, you have a medieval nation called Cilli, Cilli, and that was actually moved over from Antioch. Back in the day, they were an old crusader state north of Lebanon. So, history. I don't have any notes prepared for this episode, but every single time I talk to anybody, I always end up bringing up some historical this, that, or the third. So I figured I would be good at talking about it. Unfortunately, without some sort of a note to tap into. Whenever I'm just looking at this green light on the camera and talking into this red light on the microphone, it's like my brain goes blank. I'm sure over time I'll learn to crush that. I'm sure over time my sound quality will get better. I'll move into here and then you won't hear the rattling of the AC. I'm sure I'll get a better microphone in time and I'll get a more clear camera that I won't immediately ruin with Windex like I did with this camera. I got a thin thumbprint on it, fingerprint. And I thought, oh, instead of a microfiber cloth, it'd be a very intelligent idea to take some Windex and a regular paper towel and just scrape it over, and then, oh, what do you know, it ends up, like, ruining the film on top of it, so that there's, like, oceanic amoebas speckling it. It is what it is. But Poland, they took back large portions of Mongol territory with their winged hussars. And Lithuania would probably be the #1 reconquester of Eastern European lands from the Mongols. They took the entire area of Odessa all the way up and around, and they secured Moldavia, which was also claimed, massive farmlands claimed by the Mongols. It was very good to get the breadbasket of Ruthenia back from the Far East, but ultimately it was familial feuding that did the Mongol Empire in, not any major concerted efforts on the West. We had essentially consigned ourselves to being semi-vassals on their peripheries. I think Marco Polo goes much more into detail about this, but I haven't personally researched the Mongols nearly enough for how fascinating a people and a time in history where they expanded into the world's largest contiguous empire. It gets slept on. Don't sleep on the Mongols. They made it into Warhammer 40k even, through Jagatai, which is a contraction of Chagatai, which was a tribal confederation of Sunni Muslims in the area north of Tibet, so proper Mongol land. That also comprised a lot of Turkic and a lot of Turkic land. Bukhara is the most fascinating part of the Turco-Mongol world, and it's very close to oh shoot, what's that area with the bread? It starts with an S. Well, I forget. But Bukhara was the ancient capital, and I studied Bukhara, and I found out about a guy named Aslan Israel, and he was actually the first Seljuk. So remember I talked about how the Alemanni, the original tribal Alemanni, came from Hungary, Transylvania. Well, the original Seljuks came from Bukhara, and there's a very fascinating history that you can find of the history of Arslan Israel, where you get the lion Aslan from, and his sons that would go on to found the Seljuk dynasty. Of course, he was descended from Seljuk, which was the gene father of that lineage. But they would go on to form the richest empire that I can think of. Unfortunately, just like London and Amsterdam, a lot of the wealth was funneled back into the capital, and the peripheries left to waste. And unfortunately, but coldly, that is the reality of empire. And the communists don't have a solution to this because Moscow is still, and always was, the capital by which the enforcement of laws and regulations was meted out the power center of the Soviet regime. Changed nothing. The same families that were rich before Mao took over are rich after Mao left. So that's a huge indictment in the socialist philosophy, since that's the one thing that it said all the sacrifice was for, and it didn't accomplish it in any way, shape, or form. The most interesting thing that communism ever did was unite the Balkans under Yugoslavia, and that apparently only happened because of Josip Broz Tito being an amazing leader. And they probably would have aligned under any sort of a political philosophy. Pardon the pause. So I think that wraps it up for today. Merry Christmas Eve, everybody. Hope everybody is having a nice, relaxing, calm, cool, and collected holiday. I hope everybody makes good resolutions for the new year, because this next year is gonna be very active. The stagnation and the senseless destruction is going to at least be channeled into a moving machine. I'm not saying there's going to be less destruction. I'm not saying everything's going to make sense. But we're finally going to see an American-made machine that actually gets the resources instead of a variety of bank accounts around the world, Swiss vaults, London financiers. I believe that coming years are more of an opportunity than most people have seen in their lifetimes. And I severely hope and pray that people will change their attitudes and they really start looking to their neighbor, to their friend, to a stranger, and say, how can we integrate everything into a stronger unit? It's not what my country can do for me. It's what I can do for my country. Keep that in mind. And I hope everybody has a good one. Take care.